Your body is on fire right now, invisibly, and you have no idea, because chronic inflammation does not announce with pain. It shows up years later as fatigue that never lifts, that drains for no reason, skin that will not clear, brain fog that makes you feel 10 years older than you are, and a doctor, your blood work does not look great. So today I am lecturing you about inflammation. I am going to show you one full day, hour by hour meal, exactly how I eat and move to keep that fire turned all the way down. No powders, no 7-day for Tuesday. And by the time this video ends, you will know precisely what to tomorrow morning. First, let's kill a myth. Anti-inflammatory living is not a diet you white-knuckle through for 30 days and then abandon the second a birthday cake shows up. It is not a list of foods locked away forever, and it is definitely not something you need a fridge full of supplements to pull off. It is a pattern, quiet and repeatable, built around 4 things that show up again and again across the day without you ever having to think about them: fiber, polyphenols, healthy fats, and fermented foods. Remember those 4, because everything you are about to watch is just those 4 workhorses, hiding in plain sight, meal after meal, disguised as ordinary food. By the end of this video, you will not just know what I eat, you will understand exactly why each piece is doing what it is doing inside your body, which means you can rebuild this same day around whatever happens to be in your own kitchen. The day does not start with food. It starts with water, 1 full glass, before coffee, before my phone screen lights up my face, before anything else. Think about what your body just survived overnight. 6, 7, maybe 8 hours with zero hydration, possibly a bathroom trip or 2 draining you even further while you slept. That glass of water is not wellness influencer nonsense dressed up to sound profound. It is the single most obvious thing your body is begging for the moment your eyes open, and almost nobody actually does it, because the phone gets picked up first, the inbox gets checked first, the day gets started backwards before it has even properly begun. Then comes something even more overlooked, and it costs absolutely nothing: light. Real light, from outside, hitting your eyes before a screen ever gets the chance to. Light, the switch. It tells your nervous system that the sleepy phase is officially closed and the active phase has begun. And here is what most people genuinely do not know. Your circadian rhythm does not just control when you feel sleepy or alert. It directly controls when your immune system ramps inflammation up and when it dials it back down, hour by hour. And the loudest signal that internal clock listens to is morning light hitting your eyes, stronger than food, stronger than caffeine, stronger than anything else you could throw at it. So, step outside. 5 minutes, sometimes more if my schedule allows it. The exact number of minutes genuinely does not matter. What matters is that daylight reaches my brain before a single notification does, before a single email gets opened, before the noise of the day has a chance to hijack my attention. Now, and only now, comes a little bit of movement. Not a workout, not a sweat-soaked session on a machine, just a short walk with my family around the block, or a handful of stretches and some light bodyweight movement if the weather has turned on me. The goal here is simple and almost embarrassingly small. Wake the heart up a little, wake the lungs up a little, before food ever enters the picture at all. Water. Light. Movement third. Still no food. Still urgency. Still scrolling. Your inflammation levels genuinely rise and fall throughout the day based on that internal clock we just talked about, and this simple 3-step opening, water, light, moves every cell and every gut microbe in your body to the exact same schedule before breakfast has even started, which sets the tone for literally everything that follows for the rest of the day. Breakfast is already finished before I even wake up, because I made it the night before while half watching television on the couch. This is overnight oats, whole rolled oats, ground chia seeds, and homemade soy milk, left to soak together in the fridge overnight, then topped in the morning with fresh berries and a small handful of walnuts. This one bowl is basically a cheat sheet for the entire video, because almost everything we are about to talk about is already sitting inside it. The oats bring fiber, and not the flash-processed, stripped-down kind you find in a lot of packaged cereal. This is real whole-grain fiber, with the bran and the germ still fully intact, carrying something almost nobody has ever heard of called beta-glucan, a soluble fiber that feeds your gut bacteria so effectively that it eventually gets converted into short-chain fatty acids. And those short-chain fatty acids are the exact molecules your colon uses to keep inflammation quiet and under control. This is not a minor side effect. This is one of the primary mechanisms your entire gut relies on to regulate immune activity locally, right there in your intestinal wall, every single day. The chia adds fiber and plant-based omega-3 fats packed into one tiny seed, but here is the detail almost everyone misses. Eat chia whole, without grinding or soaking it first, and a shockingly large amount of it passes straight through your digestive system, completely undigested and completely wasted. Grind it, or let it soak overnight the way I do, and you crack the seed open, unlocking the fiber and the fat that would otherwise have stayed sealed inside a shell your body cannot break down on its own. Then there is the soy milk, honestly the single most underrated ingredient in the entire bowl, and something most people are not even thinking about at all. Soy milk is essentially a serving of legumes in liquid form. It carries isoflavones, a class of plant compound that behaves in genuinely interesting ways inside the body, along with a real dose of plant protein and a solid amount of calcium. I make mine at home with soybeans, water, a milk maker, and a strainer, and the whole process takes about 35 minutes, most of which I spend doing something else entirely, so the actual hands-on time is minimal. It is cheap, it is organic, and honestly, it tastes better than most of what you will find on a store shelf. If you are buying it instead of making it, look for exactly 2 ingredients on the label: soybeans and water. Nothing else needs to be in there. The berries on top are not decoration, even though they look like it. That deep, saturated color you see in blueberries, blackberries, and raspberries is nature's way of packaging polyphenols into something visible. And generally speaking, the darker and deeper the pigment, the higher the polyphenol payload sitting inside. The walnuts bring plant-based omega-3 fats. And this is not just a guess or a nice-sounding claim. A 2-year randomized controlled trial found that people who ate walnuts on a daily basis showed measurably, substantially lower inflammatory markers circulating in their blood compared to people who did not, and this was not a tiny statistical blip, it was a genuinely meaningful drop. By the time that bowl is finished, I am already sitting near 15 grams of fiber for the day. It puts me roughly halfway toward a daily target of 30 grams. And that 30-gram number is not some arbitrary wellness slogan either. Research has repeatedly shown that people who consistently hit around 30 grams of fiber a day carry close to half the odds of having elevated CRP, which stands for C-reactive protein, the exact blood marker your doctor checks when they are hunting for signs of inflammation running quietly in the background of your body. So think about where that leaves me. 3 of the 4 workhorses, fiber, polyphenols, and healthy fats, are already checked off before 9 in the morning on a single spoon without a single supplement in sight. The 4th one, fermented food, is still coming later in the day, so hang tight. Here is the most underrated anti-inflammatory tool that exists, and it is not a food at all, it is the walk you take right after you eat. A review that specifically looked at light walking after meals, not jogging, not an intense workout, just ordinary walking, found measurably lower blood sugar spikes and measurably lower insulin spikes compared to simply sitting still after a meal. That is genuinely the entire ask, 15 if you have the time available. You will feel lighter, less bloated, and noticeably clearer almost immediately, and that alone would make it worth doing. But here is why it actually matters for inflammation specifically and not just comfort. A sharp glucose spike after eating creates oxidative stress inside your body, and that same spike weakens the lining of your gut at the exact same time, making it more permeable than it should be. Put oxidative stress and a compromised gut barrier together, and you have essentially built the perfect recipe for feeding chronic, low-grade inflammation day after day, meal after meal, without ever noticing it happening. A short walk after eating blunts that spike before it can do any of that damage, which means your immune system never even has to respond to a threat that was completely avoidable in the first place. If it is raining outside, 10 bodyweight squats in the living room does essentially the same job, because the point is not distance, the point is simply activating the muscles and giving that glucose somewhere useful to go. Lunch is deliberately boring, and that is genuinely the entire point of it. It is whatever happens already be sitting in the fridge. Today it is leftover chili from 2 nights ago, but it changes constantly depending on the week. Sometimes soup, sometimes stew, it truly does not matter, because the underlying architecture behind the meal never changes no matter what you happen to call it. I always try to keep two things stocked in the fridge without fail. First, a big batch of freshly cooked beans, made once a week in a pressure cooker with garlic and onion, because lentils, black beans, and chickpeas taste like a completely different food once you have cooked them yourself instead of pouring them straight out of a can. Second, a whole grain that has already been cooked, whether that is farro, quinoa, or brown rice, cooked once at the start of the week, and then eaten across several days without any extra effort. Here is the twist that genuinely surprises most people the first time they hear it. These leftovers are not just convenient for saving time, they are actually becoming healthier for your gut the longer they sit in the fridge. Starchy foods like beans and whole grains develop something called resistant starch as they cool down, and resistant starch is remarkable because it feeds an entirely different set of gut bacteria than regular fiber does, and it reaches different parts of your colon that regular fiber never really touches. So taking yesterday's chili, stirring in a few extra spoonfuls of cold beans, and pouring the whole thing over a bed of cooled whole grain is not only fast and nearly effortless, it is quietly more powerful for your gut than eating the exact same meal fresh on the very first day it was cooked. I want to pause here for a quick, honest word about legumes, because I genuinely believe they are the single most disrespected food in the average diet. They are cheap. They are shelf-stable for years without going bad. You get around 12 grams of fiber per cup, which is a serious contribution toward that 30-gram daily target we talked about earlier. And when you cool them overnight in the fridge, the resistant starch content climbs even higher, effectively turning your colon into what I like to think of as a short-chain fatty acid factory quietly running in the background, and that entire process is directly anti-inflammatory from start to finish. Whenever possible, or the stew with a small salad built entirely from whatever vegetables happen to be sitting in the crisper drawer that day, maybe carrots, cucumber, cherry tomatoes, whatever is actually available, plus whatever seeds and nuts are sitting in the pantry, pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds, sometimes more walnuts if there are any left. On top goes a real drizzle of extra virgin olive oil, a squeeze of lemon, a splash of balsamic vinegar, a little salt and pepper to finish it off. I specifically want a genuinely high-quality extra virgin olive oil, because that slightly bitter, peppery sensation you feel at the back of your throat when you taste real olive oil is not a flaw or an accident, it is the phenolic compounds inside the oil actively doing their work. Learn to actually want that bitterness, because it is a direct signal that the polyphenols are present and doing something useful. If there is bread involved at all, I want it to be a proper sourdough, and when I check the ingredient label, I want it to be as boring and simple as possible, ideally just flour and water, nothing else hiding in there to complicate things. By the time lunch is completely finished, between the chili and the salad, I have usually worked somewhere between 10 and 12 different plant foods in a single meal, and the day is already well past the halfway mark toward that 30 grams of fiber target, all without a single moment of feeling restricted or deprived. When lunch wraps up, what comes next follows the exact same pattern as breakfast, another short walk, even if it is only 5 minutes around the block, because your digestion deserves the same small favor it received earlier in the day. Let me pause here and say something directly, because I think it might be the single most important idea in this entire video, and it is genuinely easy to miss if you are only focused on counting individual ingredients. What actually makes a day anti-inflammatory is not one specific food, and it is not a single supplement, and it is not even one rule followed with perfect discipline. It is variety, stacked across the day, stacked across the week, stacked across the entire season of your life. One of the largest open gut microbiome studies ever conducted looked at more than 10,000 people and asked one deceptively simple question: who actually has the healthiest looking gut microbiome of everyone studied? And the answer genuinely surprised the researchers running the study. It was not the group that identified as strictly vegan. It was not the group eating the most meat either. That category barely registered as a meaningful factor at all. The people with the healthiest, most diverse gut bacteria were consistently the ones eating the widest possible variety of different plant foods across a given week, specifically 30 or more distinct plants counted individually. Now, that number 30 is not some rigid magic threshold carved in stone, and you should not stress over hitting it exactly. The underlying principle behind it is what genuinely matters here. Different fibers feed different bacterial species living in your gut. Different polyphenols trigger different biochemical signals throughout your body. More variety in what you eat translates directly into more resilience inside your gut microbiome, and resilience is really the entire goal of everything we are talking about today. So when you are watching this day unfold and mentally checking off fiber, polyphenols, healthy fats, and fermented food at each meal, understand that the real secret is not simply that those four categories show up, because that alone would be too easy to explain in one sentence. The real secret is that those four categories show up inside dozens of genuinely different plants, all day long, every single day, week after week, without it ever feeling like a chore. Afternoons stayed deliberately light for me, and there is a reason behind that too. I still have work to finish, I still need to think clearly and stay sharp, and heavy digestion sitting in my stomach is the last thing I want dragging me down in the middle of a productive afternoon stretch. My go-to during this window is a cup of matcha, which is genuinely loaded with polyphenols, and I would honestly argue that matcha deserves to be thought of as a microbiome-supporting drink disguised as a simple caffeine fix. If I want a snack during the afternoon, and sometimes I genuinely do, I keep it simple on purpose, usually a piece of fruit, a nice crisp apple most days, though I will admit I also love sumo oranges, despite how expensive they always seem to be at the store. The afternoon is exactly the window where almost everyone else around you hits a wall and reaches for something sugary, just to survive the next couple of hours at their desk. That is precisely the moment where all of the earlier choices from the morning quietly pay their dividend, because a properly fed gut combined with stable blood sugar means there is no crash waiting to happen at 3 in the afternoon, no matter how the rest of the office is feeling by then. Dinner is a burrito bowl, and before anyone jumps in to tell me that a bowl does not count as a real dinner, let me actually walk you through exactly what is inside it. Because this single bowl might genuinely be the most complete anti-inflammatory meal of the entire day, from start to finish. On the bottom goes farro, a proper whole grain carrying fiber, real plant protein, magnesium, and slow-release carbohydrates that will not spike your blood sugar the way refined grains reliably do. On top of that go a couple of generous spoonfuls of black beans, the exact same ones cooked earlier in the week with garlic and onion, sometimes a little cumin stirred in for good measure, and that becomes tonight's legume contribution to the meal. Then comes fresh salsa, made from chopped tomato, onion, lime, cilantro, and a jalapeno if I am feeling ambitious that night, sometimes pushed far enough to genuinely make me sweat a little by the end of the bowl. Chopping and lightly cooking tomato actually increases the availability of lycopene, a powerful plant compound found concentrated in tomatoes, and here is an interesting detail most people never learn, because lycopene happens to be fat-soluble, which means its absorption improves dramatically when you pair it with the very next ingredient going into the bowl, which is avocado. Half an avocado on the side brings a solid dose of healthy fat, along with a genuinely shocking amount of fiber packed into something so small and unassuming. A handful of pumpkin seeds goes on top next, adding crunch along with zinc and magnesium, two minerals that quietly support a huge number of processes throughout your body. Then whatever fresh vegetables happen to be hanging around the fridge get chopped up and thrown in too: red onion, chives, extra tomato, really anything that seems like it belongs in a burrito bowl that particular night. And here is the piece almost nobody thinks about, the ingredient that 99% of people watching this video are probably not considering now, and I genuinely want you to become part of the 1% that does. Fermented food, the fourth and final workhorse we promised you back at the very beginning. With a warm bowl like this one, I specifically want the fermented component to stay cold, so I reach for kimchi straight out of the fridge, because heat destroys the live active cultures that actually make fermented food worth eating in the first place, and warming it up would essentially waste the entire benefit. Farro, black beans, fresh vegetables, salsa, avocado, pumpkin seeds, cold kimchi on the side, one final squeeze of lime over the whole thing to finish it off. Every single one of the four categories we started this video talking about shows up in one bowl, and once again, the real strategy underneath all of it stays exactly the same as it has been all day long, which is variety. The bowl itself is simply the delivery system carrying that variety into your body. You have probably noticed the same pattern repeating itself after literally every meal today, and that repetition is entirely on purpose. In the evening, This usually means a wildly one-sided basketball challenge with my son in the driveway, and given that I am 6'4" and he is 9 years old, you can probably guess who wins most nights, though he would strongly disagree with that framing. But the specific activity genuinely does not matter here. Only the underlying habit of moving a little bit after eating matters, whatever form that movement happens to take on any given evening. I also try to finish dinner as early as I realistically can, ideally somewhere around 7 in the evening, though I will be honest, some days that simply does not happen the way I would like it to, and there is a real biological reason sitting behind this preference, not just a rule I follow for the sake of having a rule to talk about. Your gut does the overwhelming majority of its repair work overnight while you sleep. Your microbiome composition shifts overnight. The lining of your intestines actively regenerates itself overnight. The tight junctions between individual gut cells, the ones directly responsible for keeping your gut barrier properly sealed, tighten back up overnight. The earlier your body genuinely understands that digestion is finished for the night, the more uninterrupted time it has available to complete that entire repair process before morning light arrives again, and the whole cycle restarts. This directly leads to a rule I hold on to even when it is genuinely difficult to follow, and that rule is simple. Nothing after dinner. That means no snacks, no candy, and certainly no alcohol once dinner is finished for the night. I will be completely honest with you here, because pretending this is effortless would not be fair to you. Just recently, I found myself standing in front of the pantry at 10:30 at night, seriously and genuinely tempted by a bowl of sweet, buttery popcorn calling my name from the shelf. What actually stopped me in that moment was reminding myself exactly how much better my body constantly feels the following morning whenever I actually respect this particular rule, instead of breaking it. What I do allow myself instead, when I want something small before bed, is a little glass of pomegranate juice or tart cherry juice, both of which carry their own genuine polyphenol benefit, without disrupting that overnight repair window we just talked about. As the evening continues winding down, usually somewhere around 9 o'clock, everything around the house starts slowing down on purpose. The lights get dimmer throughout the rooms. I make a real deliberate effort to limit my exposure to bright screens during this window, especially anything involving laptop work late at night. I have genuinely noticed, and I would ask you to pay attention and see if you notice the exact same thing in your own life, that doing laptop work late in the evening reliably leads to noticeably worse sleep the following night, almost without exception. I try to honor what my own body has clearly taught me about this over time, rather than fighting against it out of stubbornness. And here is one final piece that genuinely ties this entire data together into something coherent. I try to go to bed at roughly the same time every single night, weekdays and weekends both. Yes, getting a sufficient total number of sleep hours matters enormously, nobody is disputing that. But your body also wants rhythm, consistency, predictability, and that consistency turns out to be incredibly powerful when your actual goal is living an anti-inflammatory life over the long run, rather than just for a single week. So just remember this as you go about your own days from here forward. Your body, every single cell inside it, and every microbe quietly living in your gut, all operate on some version of an internal clock, and inflammation answers directly to how well that clock gets respected day after day, whether or not you happen to be paying attention to it in any given moment. That is the entire day, beginning to end, start to finish, nothing left out. No supplements lined up on the kitchen counter. No detox powders mixed into a glass of water. No long, restrictive list of foods permanently banned from ever touching my plate again. Just real food, cooked once in reasonable bulk, and eaten steadily across the entire week that follows. 4 simple workhorses, fiber, polyphenols, healthy fats, and fermented food, showing up again and again throughout the day without ever feeling forced or effortful in the moment. A little bit of movement woven in after nearly every single meal. Dinner finished early and genuinely respected as a real stopping point for the day rather than an arbitrary suggestion. A consistent bedtime treated with exactly the same seriousness as anything else sitting on my calendar that week. This is not a rigid diet with a fixed end date circled on a calendar somewhere, and it is not a short-term challenge you grit your teeth through before quietly returning to old habits. It is simply a way of eating and living that you could genuinely start tomorrow morning. With the very first glass of water you decide to drink the moment your eyes open. If any part of what you just only resonated with you, and I really hope that it did, there is a lot more sitting underneath the surface of how inflammation actually works inside your body, why it quietly builds up in the first place long before you ever feel a single symptom, and exactly how you can go about designing your own personal version of the day you just watched, built entirely around whatever foods you already have sitting in your own kitchen right now. Everything you need to get started with all of that is completely free. The link is sitting right below this video, and I will genuinely see you there.